There we go. Welcome to the Bike Rally Rider Safety presentation for Monday, April 4th, 2022. I'm Jeff Gibson. I'm one of the co-leads of training and support, and Steve.
Which is me.
Yeah, introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Steve Yates, and I'm going to save the intro for the general introductions. And I'm on this committee as well as one of the team leaders along with Jeff.
Yeah, and we're actually not going to do intros for this session, Steve, because we've got so much material and too many people to go through. So sorry, we're not going to get you to introduce each other. Just not quite time for it in this session. The best way to introduce yourself to other riders is to show up to training rides. You get to meet them in person that way, for real. So I'm just going to go through the land acknowledgement before we start talking about rider safety. We acknowledge the land we're coming together on this evening. It's the traditional territory of many nations. Collectively, this land might be referred to as Turtle Island for each of the peoples that have lived here for thousands of years, and others have their own names for this land. In Toronto, this is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. In Kingston, this is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas, and Wendake. And in Montreal, it's the land of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, along with the Mohawk and Haudenosaunee. If you're joining us from somewhere else, we wish to acknowledge the people who lived where you live, drink from the waters you drink from, and have slept under the same skies for such a long time. These lands are now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at mainly rider safety, of course. We are doing one of the training seminars now. There's the outdoor training, or I should just finish the training seminars. There are two types. One is the orientation, but for training itself, safety, there is this seminar. Outdoor training, of course, are what we started on the weekend. We'll talk about mandatory equipment that you must have to be safe on the rally. In fact, that you're required to have in order for us to have these hundreds of people do this at the same time. Mandatory milestones will refer to how much you can ride by what dates. You'll see how that works. And probably most importantly, we'll talk about safety on the road.
So, and if you have questions during the presentation, lots of options for you. You can put your question into the chat feature in Zoom, just type it in and we'll answer it while we go. There's a raise hand feature in Zoom, and one of the options, I think it's under the, where would it be? Oh, I don't see it in my menu right now. But anyway, there's a way to raise your hand in Zoom to do it electronically if you want, or in the worst case, if you're having trouble typing or finding the raise hand thing, just unmute and speak up. We're happy to answer your questions as we go. And I see a chat already. It's under reactions. Thank you, Teacher Kate.
Okay, co-chairs are Gabby and Sam, who you see there. Gabby's on the left, Sam on the right. They are the people to go to for all questions under which we are. And you see Jeff photobombing in the back there. And this is us, taken actually 2 years ago when Jeff and I cycled up to Ottawa. We took 5 days up, a day there, and 5 days back on a different route. So we ride our bikes a lot.
We do. We're addicted to cycling.
Yeah.
So let's talk about training seminars. And for the most part, you'll know sorry, I just want to mute my phone there. You've been through most of them. This was one of the last Zoom training seminars that we're going to do, but coming up, we have mandatory sessions that include basic bike safety checks and flat tire fixes. So you'll learn how to fix a flat tire at an upcoming session, mandatory if you're a first-year rider. And it's lots of fun, trust me. not getting a flat tire. That is really not fun when you're riding a bike, but learning how to fix it and getting back on your bike and saying, wow, I did this and I can ride my bike again. That's really rewarding. So we will teach you how and on the bike rally, for the ride, any training ride and the ride to Montreal, you're expected to know how to change your own flat tire. I know it's tough when you're new, and trust me, there are lots of other riders who are happy to help you if you just wave your hand at the side of the road if you're struggling to do it. But by the time you ride to Montreal, we're hoping that you'll be an expert like the rest of us on how to fix your bike's flat tires. There'll be separate sessions on hill climbing. We were talking about those before the presentation started, for those of you who joined early. Those will be in June, where on a weekday evening, we'll meet somewhere a little bit hilly. High Park is one down the Don Valley path, because it's got some hills up to the main roads. Some different locations for those where you can get some experience and learn some tips on how to climb hills efficiently. Those are the dates for the flat fix sessions down there. Sunday, May 15th, sorry, and Saturday, June 4th. We're going to run those at 4 o'clock both days at Queen's Park, so that you can finish your training ride that day and then show up at Queen's Park to join us. So Steve, if you can just make sure everyone's muted, that'd be great. And then, like I said, the hill climbing will be done in June. So outdoor training, we have already started. It says here proposed start because we first gave this session. So if I can just remind everyone to mute. By the way, I'm hearing a lot of background noise. That'd be great.
I'm finding the overall one. I know it's there.
No, there isn't one. I think you have to just click the participant list and mute them. So we've already started training rides. Yay. And they were awesome. They've been awesome so far. The one that we did on Saturday, April 2nd, 10 in the morning from Kipling Station, 35-kilometer ride to Courtney Park and back was really awesome. It was chilly, but sunny and really nice. And I think we had about 20 people out. So that was really good. We're doing that same ride again, the same route on Sunday, April the 10th. That's this Sunday coming up. The forecast looks really good, so you don't want to miss that one. And you will have the benefit of me and Steve sweeping the ride. So sweeping means that we're going to be on our bikes at the very back of the ride, helping out riders who are stopped at the side of the road, or just helping the riders who are struggling at the back of the ride to motivate them and keep them going. And so you'll get to see us there on Saturday, April 10th. The way it works is we do 1 ride per weekend in April and then 2 rides every weekend from May. You'll notice, by the way, on the calendar, and we'll talk about the next slide, that we do have special rides in April on the weekends that we don't have training rides. For the training ride start times, they start at 10 in the morning for April. In May, they're going to start at 9 a.m. And then Saturday rides from June onward will start at 8 a.m. But all the Sunday rides always start at 10 a.m. That's historically because of when the subway used to open. And we know it opens early, but just for people who don't like to get up early, the Sunday rides always start at 10 in the morning. The rides always start with announcements and warm-ups and a chance to socialize. So try to arrive at least 15 minutes before the rides actually happen, so that we can start on time and everyone can leave when they're supposed to. And you'll need to complete a COVID screener and waiver before you ride on a training ride.
So special no drop rides. There are always people who are just starting to do this, who are enthusiastic about going to Montreal, but are a little nervous about riding in traffic. And there are a lot of techniques to keep safe in traffic. And once you get used to it and you become confident, you do feel fairly safe, but you do have to watch out for things. So we have we have a series of 4 no drop rides. No drop means that everybody stays together. It's not like the regular training rides where you go at your own pace, or you go with people you know, or ride with people who ride the same speed as you do. This is everybody's together. And on the way, we discuss things like making left turns in traffic, what to do if you come up to a truck that's sitting at a light, things that will make you confident and keep you safer. Also, we do talk about cycling laws and talking about the clips on the pedals. Some people who haven't tried them before are a little nervous about them, so we give you some advice about that. So the dates are, and they vary: Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. So Sunday, April 3rd was yesterday's ride, which went very well. And although of course it was two very hardy people who came on that very cold ride. And then next Saturday, the following Sunday, and the following Saturday. We meet at Christie Subway Station, 10 a.m. If you want to do it, pre-register, training@bikerally.org, and it is weather permitting. Yesterday was dicey. It could have been raining. It didn't, and it was quite cold, so we went with it, and it turned out actually to be quite nice.
So this slide basically just gives you a quick chart of the outdoor training rides. They're all posted to the Bike Rally calendar, and I can tell you already that we've already changed one of them. Let me see if I can quickly find it. Yeah, the Saturday, April 16th, we've actually had to swap that out. It's now going to be the Warden Zoo, not Finch-Cummer, because the subway to Finch will be closed on Saturday, April 16th, somewhere between St. Clair and Lawrence. So we didn't want to get people up to Finch on a subway line that's closed. So the keynote here is, yeah, we do have rides pretty much every weekend. That's great, but you're going to have to keep checking the Bike Rally calendar. Let me go to the next slide. There's the link to the calendar, and check that a day or two before the ride itself to make sure you know the final start location for the ride, that you can check the final map for the ride. There are links to the maps. There's a downloadable cue sheet. All sorts of things. And you want to check those as close as possible to the ride, because unfortunately we have to make last minute changes here and again, sometimes because of the route having to change or the actual start location.
Mandatory equipment. Now, I was just going to say that if you have a question, you can use the chat function, and we'll deal with it as we can. There are a lot of people, but we'll see what happens anyway. So these are things that you actually do need. You cannot ride in the rally without a helmet. You need spare tubes, tire levers, the bike pump, or CO2 cartridges. Everybody must be able to fix their own flat. There will be, let's say, 200 people on the ride. There will be mechanics available. And there will be friendly people who have tire pumps and extra tubes, but you really need to have your own, because I would say most people will get a flat somewhere in the training rides or on the actual ride, and you'll be on your own for a little while, and there won't be that much help. So you do have to learn how to do it. Once you learn, it's just a process. It's not that difficult. To keep your body going, water, electrolytes, and nutrition. So electrolytes are like Gatorade. I don't use Gatorade because of the sugar in it. And I want to be able to control how much sugar I'm taking in, and Gatorade is just, anyway. So I use an electrolyte powder, and I put that in my water, and that works. And the point of the electrolytes is to keep your muscles firing when you're going a long distance, especially if you're repeating it day after day. By nutrition, we mean it could be a Cliff Bar or a banana or something that's going to give you energy when you're in the middle of a ride. On the ride to Montreal, you don't really need to worry about that because of the frequency of stops and provision of food. You definitely should have nutrition with you on the training rides. Sunscreen and sunglasses, if you think about it, you're going to be out for many, many hours on the training rides and on the ride to Montreal. And your skin can really take a beating. Sunglasses, again, for eye protection, also just for your own comfort. You will need no, I shouldn't say you will need your health card. You should have your health card with you. And we hope you don't need it. You probably won't need it. Mask and hand sanitizer. We assume that things will not be completely cleared up by then. A cell phone, even more important on the training rides, because we won't be as thoroughly covered as we will be going to Montreal. And a way to know where you are and where you're going, which is the cue sheet on paper, in a map, or a GPS route loaded. And also prepare for weather. We often see people riding in really cool weather, not properly covered, or just getting caught in rain. And it won't kill you, but it's miserable if you're not ready for the weather.
So I'm just going to go through, we've got a whole bunch of comments and questions. So wow, great group here. Rebea is asking, can individuals not signed up for the ride join in the training ride? So not signed up for the Friends for Life bike rally, can they join our training rides? And the answer is absolutely yes, as long as they abide by our rules. For example, they must wear a helmet on the ride, and they'll be asked to sign into the ride so that they sign a liability waiver just like everyone else. But by all means, and if you can get your friends to come on the training ride and realize how amazing this whole event is and get them to sign up for the ride to Montreal, way better. Vincent is asking, are those all mandatory for the trainings as well? So I guess, Vincent, you're asking if the list Steve went through is mandatory for training rides? Absolutely, yes. We're not going to check to make sure everyone's got everything that's mandatory. So it's up to you ultimately, but we would strongly recommend that if you're going to do training rides, you have everything we've listed here with you. It's dangerous otherwise. Stephen's suggesting Nuun, I think they're tablets, which I think is what's pictured there, isn't it? Yeah, Nuun is that bottle that's in the top column of the pictures. So yeah, no sugar, they're just little tablets that you shake into the water and they dissolve. And Mark, you're in Ottawa, Mark, it looks like. So there's a group of people in Ottawa who are going to be doing their own training rides. I assume that's great if you are. Ottawa is an amazing city to ride in, right, Steve?
Yeah, it's, I got my start riding in Ottawa.
Way back when riding was a new thing. I'm kidding.
And the streetcars were steam powered. Okay, milestones. So you really want to be training consistently from now to when we leave. And I guess rule of thumb is if you can get in half of the training rides, you're going to be fine. You can do it if you get in a selection of the training rides, depending on your fitness level right now, whatever your base fitness level is. So if you've got a good base fitness level, you might get away with fewer, but the more of the rides you do, the easier the ride to Montreal will be. So if you look at the map at the bottom, this gives you an idea of what we're actually doing each day. So day one, from out of the box, we're going 110 kilometers. And the longest training ride we have is about 120. Is that right, Jeff?
126 or something. I think it's just almost 130.
Which is Port Hope to Adolphustown.
Yeah.
Which is the longest day we have. And then we have a short ride, which is when we have half a day off in Kingston, we stay at Queen's University. And for some reason, a lot of people wear red dresses on that day, but we'll go into that later. And then we have 110, 104, 101 kilometers, all pretty consistent. So that's what you're going to be doing. So in order to be ready for that, you need to be, or at least we're saying you must have done 40 kilometers by May 15th. Well, that's easy because the first training ride is 35. By June 26, 80 kilometers. So work yourself up to that by then. And then by the mid-July, you should be able to do 200 kilometer rides back to back, say on a weekend. If you can do that, you're going to be fine. All training rides will be supported, and there will be sweeps, but the support, remember, this is over quite a distance. It's not the same as it will be in Montreal, going to Montreal. It's quite intense, the support there. Longer rides will also have vehicle sweeps. So on a longer ride, if something catastrophic happens to your bike, they'll be able to take the bike with you.
Yeah, and my suggestion would be if you only do 4 rides to train for Montreal, you do a 40 kilometer ride, an 80 kilometer ride, and 2 100 kilometer rides, you'll probably find the ride to Montreal really tough and not a very fun experience from a physical perspective. So if you can set aside the time to do at least half of the training rides that are on the calendar, then you'll find the ride to Montreal really enjoyable and actually pretty easy compared to some of those tougher training rides. So
I just want to say the PowerPoint is going to be shared, is being recorded now. Just a question from Thomas.
Okay, thanks. So let's talk about safety on the road. And our first lesson on safety on the road, as the picture shows, do not wave on your bike. What you didn't see is what happened after this picture. The two cyclists waved and then they fell onto each other. No, and I'm totally kidding. These are actually experienced cyclists. If you feel comfortable holding your hand up and waving while you're riding, by all means do it. But we're going to talk about more serious safety stuff in the slides that are coming up. But I see another question. Are all teams taking different routes to Montreal? And no, the answer is we're all taking the exact same route, the one that Steve just showed you. Everyone riding to Montreal is riding the same route. We do have some riders doing a one-day ride only, Toronto to Port Hope, and then they go home. And we have some other people who are joining us to start in Kingston to Montreal on the same route that the rest of us do, at the same time, of course. And then the bulk of the riders are doing all 6 days, Toronto to Montreal, all the exact same route. What you'll find, though, is that everyone rides at different paces. It's the same on training rides as the ride to Montreal. So we aren't riding together as one big clump of bikes. That would actually be kind of dangerous. We're all spread out at different speeds. And the nice thing about the training rides, if you show up and you're not really familiar with who's doing the ride, is the more training rides you do, the more likely you'll find people who ride at your pace, and you can make good friends with them and get used to riding with them and then enjoy the ride to Montreal with them. I see one more in the chat. Oh, okay, you're welcome. So safety on the road really starts the night before you ride. And here are some key points. You want to get a good sleep the night before so that you're alert. Your brain has to function properly so that you're not going to crash your bike. Make sure you're well fed. You want to fuel your body so that you can last for the entire ride. That means having a good dinner the night before and a good breakfast the morning of the ride. Lots of carbs. I know a lot of people want to diet and avoid carbs, but you burn a lot of energy riding your bike. So carbohydrates are actually highly recommended. For me personally, my mornings breakfast before I ride, I always have oatmeal because oatmeal is a really good slow release carb. Get your gear ready the night before the ride. Fill your water bottles, get your bike out, get all those required items put together by the door so you don't forget anything and you're not in a panic the morning of the ride. And then after you've done the ride, make sure you get a good rest, make sure you eat and drink well to rehydrate and renourish your body, and then get ready for another good ride after that.
Okay. Please ensure you're properly equipped. That starts with the bicycle itself, with your frame size. It needs to be correctly sized for you, but also like to your measurements. Also make sure the bike is maintained and checked over for safety. So take it into a bike shop, have them do an overhaul on it. Checking all of these things that are listed here: wheels, chain, gears, brakes, pads, lights, reflectors, all of that. Just one word back on frame size. A bike store can measure you for the frame size, but you probably know whether the frame size is correct for you based on how it feels when you're riding it. Know the rules of the road. We're going to talk about that later. Be aware of potential hazards. In other words, kind of goes along with the rules of the road, knowing what kinds of things can come up to try to be able to anticipate. Listen to your body as you're riding. Once in a while, think about how your shoulders feel. If you're in any of the spin classes, you get the idea. How do your shoulders feel? How is your back? What are your legs doing? Are you feeling pain? Are you feeling discomfort? You want to be able to keep your body comfortable for that distance. Before the ride, check the weather. Be ready for it. We talked about that before. Ride responsibility and have fun. If you're not having fun, we know that, and we know where you live, and we'll enforce that.
Okay, so let's talk about safety on the road and required safety equipment. What does the law in Ontario require you to have on your bike? Well, that picture shows you. It's got a little list there. You must have a bell or a horn on your bike. Even if you have a really expensive, flashy road bike, you want to have a bell or a horn on it. Otherwise, you could get stopped by the police and ticketed not having that. And trust me, it comes in really handy to have some way of making noise other than screaming at people. Make sure you've got a front light and a rear light and or reflector on your bike, but that's only if you're riding a half hour before sunset or half hour after sunrise, which, well, half hour after sunrise, if you're starting out really early for a training ride, that might be necessary, but most of the time we aren't riding in conditions like that. You need to have white reflective tape on the front forks and red reflective tape on the rear forks of your bike as well, like the picture shows. Some optional equipment, you could have a safety flag pointing upright on your bike, or one horizontal one that points out toward traffic to keep cars from getting too close to you. I don't see too many riders like that unless they're riding in the city. On the bike rally, people don't use those very often. But a lot of people use, and Steve and I are extremely big fans of having a rear view mirror on your bike. So much easier to see what's coming up behind you than to constantly be looking back and craning your neck, because that actually takes your eyes off what's in front of you, right? So easiest to look in a mirror than to be shifting your neck around. Especially in a real quick situation where you have to think quickly, like, okay, what am I going to do here? Well, it depends on what's coming up behind me. Am I going to be able to navigate around this parked car really quickly, or is there a car coming up behind me and I have to slow down instead? The mirror will help you. But a mirror doesn't completely replace the shoulder check. You still want a shoulder check for safety. And make sure you've got reflective clothing so that you can be seen by other vehicles, especially if it's not really bright outside.
Okay, helmets. For obvious reasons, helmets are helpful. They are mandatory on the rally. One thing about helmets is they have to fit properly. If the helmet pops off, if you crash, then it's not going to help you very much. So it's a matter of knowing how to set the straps and also the little dial at the back to make sure it's fitting snugly. You don't want it to slip too much when you move the head. There should be a 2-finger width between your eyebrows and the helmet, like that. And the strap should be flat against the face rather than twisted. Side strap should meet just below the ear to make a V shape. I kind of laugh at this because until a few years ago, I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. And I had this correct, but the straps were all twisted and the V kind of came in front. And in fact, one of the straps was sticking out. And when I started to pay attention, I realized that my helmet wasn't really protecting me because it wasn't on tightly enough if I'd had a crash with it. Chin strap should be fastened snugly enough with enough room to fit 1 finger between your chin and the strap. And I talked about the dial. The dial is important. The sizing pads also that the helmet comes with, you can usually adjust those so that will also help fit it properly.
Okay, so safety on the road involves using proper hand signals so that everyone behind you, cars or bikes, know what you're about to do, right? You want to give fair warning to everyone so they're not surprised, but what? They just slow down. Why are they slowing down? So if you're making a left turn, there's a signal there pointing your hand out to the left. Right turn, most people do it by pointing their left hand upright, like that picture shows, but you can also just stick out your right hand. The problem with sticking your right hand out is that the cars behind you may not see your right hand because they're on your left side. Next to that, we've got, sorry, I just have to change my screen size. Stopping is the next one on the upper right corner there, holding your hand out and pointing your fingers down to signal that you're stopping. And definitely when you're stopping, it's not just a hand signal, you want to call that one out. It just yell out stopping so that people behind you who may not be watching your hands can hear you say that you're stopping and aren't going to ram into the back of your bike. Slowing, similar to stopping, you're just holding your hand down, but you're kind of pushing up and down with your hand to indicate slowing. And same thing, call out slowing so that people know that you're potentially not going to be going at the same pace right in front of them. If there's gravel or sand or glass coming up on the road, then whichever side it's on, take your hand out and sort of wave your hand at it like that image is showing and call it out again. Call out glass especially because you don't want people riding their bikes into glass. It'll puncture their tires. Call out the gravel, the sand. If there's an obstacle like a pothole or a bump in the road, you can point to it with the proper hand and yell out that there's a bump. And then if you want to call out the tracks, in case you think people may not see the railway or streetcar tracks coming up, just hold your 2 fingers behind your back.
Safety guide. So if you drive a car, and you haven't seen this, you'll find that basically it's the same as with a car, the same rules, a lot of the same principles. The safety guide, this is the PDF you can get online. Take a look at the guide before your first training ride, and we'll go over some of the stuff here. And we can always give safety advice. Your team leads can. So riding in traffic. The main thing is to be consistent. So if you think of yourself as a very small vehicle on the road, and you think of what you look like to drivers, one thing you want to be is predictable, because if you're predictable, they will not get nervous around you, and they will assume you're going to do what it looks like you're going to do. So as with cars, slower traffic stays right, or should, and slower traffic gives way to faster traffic when safe. So this is kind of obvious. Bicycles should be over to the right. However, there is a meter between that you have. You should be out about 1 meter from the right curb to avoid things like grates, broken glass, broken pavement. If you get too close to the curb, especially if there is a curb, it gets hazardous because you don't want to connect that curb with your wheel. Riding by parked cars, if you look at the diagram in the upper right, where it says no, this is what a lot of cyclists do. They're riding along a street, and there'll be lines of parked cars. And then there'll be the spaces between the cars where there aren't any cars. And some riders want to go in there thinking that they're safer. They're being protected by the other cars. Well, if you think about it, nobody's going to be driving in that space. That space is going to remain empty. So what you want to do is the diagram up top, keep that straight line. And for a driver driving well behind you, you're going to look predictable. And they'll know what you're going to do. Otherwise, it looks like you disappear, reappear, disappear, reappear. So you want to avoid that. Drivers in parked cars. At some point, somebody's going to be fixing something on the floor of their car. They dropped something, they're picking it up, and they open the door on their way up. You don't see them through the window. You should be watching through the windows as you're approaching. So there can be surprises about doors opening. It's called in the industry the door prize. You don't want the door prize. So try to stay, if you're in a bike lane, for example, or just on the road, try to stay about 1 meter away from the car doors, which will keep you safe. Also, as you're coming up to cars, as I said, take a look through the windows. Is there somebody sitting in that seat that could open a door at that point? If there is somebody in the seat, there's a good chance the door will open. And don't hesitate to use your bell. Bells are fun. They're really fun. Just a ding for the hell of it. But especially if you've got something coming up, a hazard, somebody on the sidewalk looks like they're about to step out, going along the Bloor bike lane. Particularly, it's a bit of a barnyard. A lot of creatures kind of wandering in and out. In that kind of a dense situation, be ready with the bell. Like I say, it's fun. Use it.
Yeah, but at the same time, be ready with your brakes too, right? So when you're riding alongside parked cars, speeding your bike real fast is probably dangerous because it's harder to stop in case you see a door swing open right in front of you. And you also want to leave enough space. So they're recommending at least 1 meter away from parked cars. So if the door swings open, you have a bit of space to be able to quickly navigate your bike around the door, assuming there's no one coming up behind you that would otherwise strike your bike.
I was also going to say, and I think this is obvious, and I think it's just intuitive, is when you're riding along in the city, anticipate something's going to happen. It doesn't usually, but things happen. I always keep my fingers on the brakes. I'm not squeezing them, but my fingers are ready to hit the brakes. And for that reason, when you're riding in a situation where there's a lot of moving parts, don't follow too closely behind the bike in front of you. It's just physics. If the bike behind, if that front wheel connects with the rear wheel of the front bike, the bike behind will go over. We know that from we've done it. We know how to do that.
Yes, Steve and I know how to collide our bikes together and cause magnificent crashes.
Basic mayhem.
Yeah. So let's talk about changing lanes. So as the diagram shows, you might have to change lanes to get around a stopped emergency vehicle, for example. You're obviously going to be riding along the right-hand side along the curb, but then you might have to get out to the lane beside you, or just navigate within your lane to get around some sort of a hazard like a hole or something like that. So the diagram shows, first thing you do a shoulder check to the left, make sure there's nothing coming up behind you. Then you signal the lane change with your left arm out. Then do another final shoulder check just to make sure everything's okay. And then you can change lanes safely if you don't see anyone coming up behind you. And by the way, it is legal for the bike to take a whole lane in Ontario and Quebec, I believe, if that's the only safe thing to do. The cars may honk at you. They may think it's rude. Too bad. If it's safe for you, that's what you do.
An example of this is in construction, sometimes you will see the road narrows down to one lane in each direction, one narrow lane in each direction. It's probably not safe to try to stay to the right of that lane because it may invite the car behind you to try to pass you, which is the reason why you can take that whole lane, but you want to be quick about it.
Yep. Yeah. So anytime that you're worried in a narrow lane that cars should not be passing you because it's just too tight, then take the whole lane and make them wait.
But impress them with your speed.
I guess, but yeah, I just like making them wait personally.
Okay, traffic turning right. Okay, this is one of the worst things. You're coming up to a light. There's a car or a truck signaling. So I'll use the signaling one first. You know it's going to turn right. Of course, you don't want to come up on its right side. I say, of course, because some people do anyway. They're not sure why. Maybe because they just feel that the road doesn't belong to them, but it does belong to you. So if that's the case, you see it's going to turn right. You go around the car. You can wait for the car to make the turn. That's fine too. But don't try to pass the car inside. Pass the car outside. That's the correct and the safe way to do it. If there is no signal on, and the car isn't moving very fast, and you think maybe it's going to turn right, it's just not signaling, then be cautious. Stay behind it until you see what it's going to do, or well, just wait for it. The worst situation is if it's a truck, especially a large truck, because they really can't see you. For all of their mirrors and such, the way that the truck is designed, you're fairly invisible to them. And that, in fact, is one of is a fairly big cause of accidents. So just treat that truck as something to stay away from. Just stay behind it. If the truck is making the turn, again, just go around.
Yeah, I think we actually have another slide on trucks coming up with some important tips too. So the shoulder check, I've referred to it a few times. Basically, that's where you're bending your head. For me, the shoulder check is bending my neck, twisting my neck so that my chin touches my shoulder. Is basically the way I do it. You can shoulder check to the left to see the cars coming up on your left. You may sometimes need to shoulder check on your right if you're going to be changing lanes to go back to the right-hand side of the road. It's crucial that you must always do it. Even if you have a mirror on your bike, when you're in traffic, always shoulder check and you let your peripheral vision judge whether or not there's someone close behind you where it's unsafe to shift sideways within the road. The key to a good shoulder check, and the reason I say just twist your neck and touch your chin to your shoulder, is you don't want to move your arms or your shoulders and accidentally steer your bike in the wrong direction. Try to keep your bike going straight when you're doing a shoulder check so that you're not actually moving. So it basically involves the glance of what's happening behind you, a scan to get a picture of what's behind you, and a stare, making contact at the motorist behind you. I would say don't do a very long stare because then you're missing out on what's happening in front of you on the bike, and that can be super dangerous. So
also a long stare can make some motorists very angry.
Too bad. Again, I just say too bad. And seriously, you don't want to really irritate motorists to the point where they can harm you. So use your best judgment there. Because generally, a car versus bike, car wins.
Okay, designated right turn lane. Pay attention to the markings in the road. You can see the arrow coming up. So you've got this right lane is coming up. There's the arrow. signal your intention to move into the left lane. That means the adjacent lane. And put yourself between the right turn lane and the one and the straight ahead lane, fairly close to the line. Of course, you're making sure that there's no car right there as you do that. And once you go through the intersection, just return to the far right side of the lane going through. It's fairly simple.
Yeah, so all this assumes you're going through the intersection. If you were making the right turn, you'd be doing that from the right turn lane, right? So how do we make left turns? The key here, as the diagram shows, is to get your bike centered in the lane before you make your left turn, so it's obvious to people behind you what you're trying to do. You don't want to make a left turn from the right-hand edge of the road, because then you could accidentally get hit by a car from behind without knowing they're coming up. So taking the whole lane just before you do your left turn, as long as it's safe to do so, as the diagram indicates, shoulder check, signal, shoulder check again, and then take the center of the lane, come to your full stop if it's a four-way stop, and then make your left turn. And by the way, before I move on to the next slide, I remember now from last time we gave this presentation, we don't actually have a slide dedicated to stop signs in this presentation because they're fairly basic, right? Everyone in this presentation knows what stop sign means. It means stop. And on the bike rally, it means you must stop. The bike rally's requirement, and this goes for all training rides, all the riding to Montreal. To me, it's anytime I'm wearing a bike rally jersey, and now it's just a habit all the time, always, always, always stop your bike at a stop sign. It doesn't matter who is there or not there, who's going to see you or not see you. Always come to a full stop and check to make sure it's clear and then go. The reason we do it for the bike rally is that we want to give a good impression as bike rally participants to other cars and other bikes on the road. And we also want to make sure that the towns we ride through know that we obey the cycling laws, because if we fail to obey them, some of those towns may not let us ride through them in the future. They have to give us permits to do that for every bike rally. And we want to impress those towns that we are good cyclists and that we stop at stop signs.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, a stop means your foot is off the pedal and you tap the ground at least to show you're stopping. It's annoying at first if you don't do it, but it just becomes a habit and then you don't even think about it. Yeah, so especially with that jersey on.
Yeah. And if you're in a training ride with other bike rally riders, be ready. They're going to stop at the stop signs. You don't want to crash into them because you think you don't have to stop. That's really embarrassing. We all stop at stop signs. Okay, so what if we're making a left turn, back to that topic, and the left turn lane is way out in another lane, so we're not riding the single lane road like the diagram shows? Well, that's just it's a little more complex. It can be kind of scary because you've got to wait for the cars to not be blocking your lane changes. And you can see from the diagram that it's just a multi-step process of your shoulder check, signal shoulder check, then do the first lane change, then go through that routine again and do your next lane change into the left turn lane. You might have to do it across 3 lanes. Some roads are really wide, right? And then you get into that left turn lane and make your left turn. Sometimes the roads are too busy and you just can't do those lane changes safely into the left turn lane before you hit the intersection. If that happens to you, just ride through the intersection to the opposite corner and then stop at that corner and then get ready to ride. So in this case, the person's riding, it looks like they're riding west. They would ride west to the corner, stop at the corner, and then ride south to make it an indirect left turn or a 2-step left turn. That would be my recommendation if you can't safely cross lanes or if you just don't feel comfortable doing it.
Roundabouts. So we're less familiar with roundabouts in Canada, in North America. But they're an extremely efficient way of getting through an intersection without having to stop. And they're actually quite a bit safer. So the general idea is to adjust your speed as you're coming up to it. Be ready to yield to anybody who's crossing as a pedestrian and to any traffic in the roundabout. So you don't have the right of way as you enter the roundabout. Anybody in the roundabout has the right of way. So choose your exit, and hopefully you've chosen your exit from the sign that's ahead of it, which exit you're going to take. Otherwise, you'll go around several times before you figure it out. And use your lane changing skills that we just talked about to merge into the correct travel lane. If there's, say, a 2-lane roundabout. So stay in the center of your lane. Don't hug the curb, which will clarify what you're actually doing. And to enter the roundabout, because you don't have the right of way, wait for there's a break of traffic in the roundabout. Don't enter the roundabout beside a car that's already in the roundabout. So left turn in a roundabout. This is bike C in the upper left. Signal left as you approach the roundabout. Keep your signal throughout the roundabout and signal right as you're entering. So just signaling as a car would. Going full circle, this is D, so turning around in other words. Signal left as you approach the roundabout. Keep your signal throughout the roundabout, signal right just before you exit, and watch out for driver's blind spots.
So Thomas is asking, are there actually roundabouts on the bike rally? And training rides, definitely. As you get outside Toronto, you go into Vaughan and other cities outside Toronto, there are absolutely roundabouts that we go through on training rides. The ride to Montreal, I think there are a few, especially in Quebec, maybe. I can't remember where they are, but there are a few on the route to Montreal. They're rare, but they exist.
Small ones as we entered Montreal, but there's a really nice roundabout in Prince Edward County, and I was bitterly disappointed when they moved the route away from it, because I think they felt that we would get confused in it, and that they would have to go and rescue people who are still going around. And I love roundabouts. I just love them aesthetically and the way they work, and they're just fun.
Yeah, and if you ride behind Steve in a roundabout, watch out. You might go around a few times because he just loves doing that. I saw Kate raise your hand. Kate, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a quick question. From the diagram, it looks like, oh, sorry, I put my video on. It looks like you are staying in the lane closest to the center for C, as opposed to being the one kind of the curb lane. Is that right?
That is what the rider is doing, yeah.
Okay. Is that, I mean, because I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better to be in the curb lane, so to speak, if there's just one lane coming out of that roundabout?
You should be in the curb lane.
Okay. Yeah, I would recommend curb lane as well, even if you're not taking the very first exit, just because changing lanes within a roundabout is actually really tricky and very dangerous, because cars go pretty fast compared to bikes in them.
So what happened here, if you look at C, bicycle C, look at where it entered. It entered from the right side lane. It went through the roundabout, and it should have, if it had stayed in the right side lane, it would have ended up going straight through instead of where it did go.
Oh, it would have taken the second exit, you mean? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it does need to change lanes and cut across to the outside lane where it exits C. So I think it's a little bit confusing there.
Okay.
Yeah. And Thomas points out, and he's right, especially in a car, that you shouldn't be in the curb lane if you're taking an exit after the first one. The curb lane is always for the next exit coming up. Right. So theoretically,
So C should have exited via the curb.
I'm pretty sure though, Steve, on the bike rally, I don't remember any multi-lane roundabouts. I think we avoid those, fortunately. So I
remember one of my early trips was in England, through England, and we were riding from Heathrow into London, and we were also trying to stay at a roundabout. You go the opposite direction. Well, we figured that out, but it was in London, and it was like a 6-lane roundabout, and they were really nice. They all stopped for me, and I didn't die. We don't have anything like that here. We just have simple.
I think we do have some multi-lane roundabouts, but those would be on really busy roads that bikes typically wouldn't come on. So so we're good there. So pedestrian crossings, always be prepared to stop. If you see those, the ones that especially have the flashing lights, I find that really handy. If you see flashing lights at a pedestrian crossing, be prepared to slow down and come to a full stop if there are people in or about to enter the intersection or the crossing, sorry. It's the law, you have to stop for them. And in fact, if you go through when the lights are flashing, you can get a pretty hefty ticket even on a bike. Do not pass within 30 meters of the pedestrian crossing. You must stay in your lane and wait till the pedestrians have completely crossed before you proceed.
So I am an expert on railway tracks and streetcar tracks. When you approach a track, you want to try to cross it with as close to a right angle as possible. So we see what's happening here. Because the track is coming at an angle, the bike has to come out in order to cross at a right angle. Now, you don't have to cross at a perfect right angle. 45 degrees is fine, or even less. But you do have to get into that position, which in this case requires that you look at what's behind. So you check your mirror and then a quick shoulder check, or you do the shoulder check and the signal. It's exactly the same. And then you go through and make that crossing. The problem is what happened to me last summer. So I had a spectacular crash, and the problem was it was a bit of a trap. The city had placed the Richmond bike lane temporarily in the middle of the tracks going down Richmond, and it culminated at a switch at Victoria, and the tracks came together, and it was almost physically impossible to avoid it. And I was going a little too fast to be able to simply stop and avoid it. Another lesson. The next day, Jeff, I think you said you saw it and they covered it with rubber. So,
yeah.
So only one person almost died. And so tracks are really serious. In this case, the track grabbed my front wheel and took my bike south, and I continued west. And so that's the worst that's going to happen. And then you'll fall, and then whatever happens when you fall. So damage to bicycle wheels is the other thing. And the other thing to watch for is if it's wet, the tracks can be slippery. If the tracks look really bad, or you just can't make that, what you need to do is stop and walk over the tracks. And as cyclists, we don't want to get off and walk, but there are situations where you really need to do that.
Yeah, I would say if you're not sure about tracks, or they look dangerous, or you just don't think you can cross them safely because of cars behind you, or because they look like a spaghetti mess of streetcar tracks like Steve went over, and just yell out stopping, come to a stop, and walk your bike.
And on the rally itself, there were a couple of tracks that were very dangerous, and we have spotters that will stop there and ask you to stop or just guide you.
Yeah, so yeah, watch out on the ride to Montreal. You're right, Steve. There are a couple of railway crossings where someone will tell you you must dismount your bike. They're just too dangerous to ride across because they're out in the countryside, not well maintained. So cycling around trucks, like we talked about before, watch out that if you're stopped behind a truck, trucks can roll back on grades and they could hit your bike. Trucks require a lot of space to stop, so their stopping happens really slowly. So if you're behind a truck, don't tailgate, because it could start stopping and you may not know why it's stopping and you hit the back of the truck. A long truck is really hard for the driver to see behind or beside them. So just assume that a truck driver cannot see you no matter where you are relative to the truck. Their blind spots are quite large. If you're in a bike lane and there's a truck near you, my advice is don't ride in the bike lane beside the truck for any distance. Just slow down, let the truck pass you, and then continue in your bike lane. Trucks often weave into bike lanes by mistake. They get too close to them. It can be really dangerous. When you're starting up on your bike, you might find it's a little wobbly. Just watch out for trucks around you when you're doing that. Trucks will probably not hear your horn or your bell or even your voice if you're yelling at them, because trucks are loud. So just be aware that making noise is probably not going to get the driver's attention. And when a truck passes you, they're going faster. They can create a huge gust of wind that can potentially knock you off your bike. So be ready for that. Be prepared for that big draft when a truck passes you, especially on a windy day, and just make sure you're not cycling too fast and you've got a good grip on your bike so that you can steady it in case it starts to wobble.
Okay, multi-use paths and trails. Okay, we're familiar with them in the city.
Oh, and sorry, I think we had a chat. Oh no, we didn't. Do we have someone with a?
I had my hand up. I almost got in a serious accident once because the truck started backing up unexpectedly. And the thing that I learned is if you can't see their mirror, they can't see you. So
yeah, well, I would just assume they don't even look anyway, even if they've got a mirror. Like truck drivers sometimes are too busy to pay attention to bikes. So just assume they do not see you.
But you are right about the mirror. Okay, multi-use paths and trails. This one is the one along the lakeshore. The thing about multi-use paths and trails is they're not just bicycle paths, although we sometimes treat them as that. Looking at Brian's puppy there. They will have pedestrians, baby strollers, bicycles, giants on stilts, people who can't hear you, they're wearing headphones or they're talking. So as you're coming up to people, use your bell, or you can call out. The speed limit is typically 20 kilometers an hour. We're not always paying attention to our speed, so I think a better rule of thumb is look at what's on the path. And if you're coming up near people, make sure that you're going slowly enough that you can stop immediately, and respect people. Give them a lot of space as you go around. A lot of people aren't expecting you, especially if you're coming from behind. You can startle people, and they become vicious, like puppies. So remember that on a path, you are in a population, you're mixed. Make sure you're visible. Make sure that they see you coming or hear you.
And generally on a multi-use path, the slowest people have the right of way, right? Just because you're riding a big, fast, powerful bike does not give you the right of way. You have to yield to the slow people on the path.
Yeah.
So this picture here of obstacles and hazards, this is a poor Toronto cyclist who has fallen into a typical Toronto pothole in spring. And trust me, they're bad every year. And this year's just as bad from what I saw on the training ride on Saturday. And Toronto is full of potholes. So just watch out and call out, right? So if you're riding in a group and you're at the front, especially, or even if you're not at the front, just make sure that you point with your finger to those holes that you're trying to avoid, yell it out, say there's a hole or gravel or glass, whatever it is. And don't be the person who falls into a pothole like that poor person there.
I want to make another plug for mirrors here. One of the things to me that are most important about having a mirror is if you're going fairly quickly, and this can happen coming down a hill or whatever, or even at a normal speed, sometimes potholes just appear. You don't see them coming up, and you may have to make a decision about going around the pothole, or maybe you'll have to go through. If there's a car right there, the mirror will let you know right away if there's somebody right on your hind quarter. You still need a quick shoulder check, but sometimes there's not time even for a shoulder check, and that can save a problem. If you see there's a car right there, you're not going to come out in front of that car. You'll have to go through it. Normally you can go through them, but there are problems with damage to rims, and just it can be very uncomfortable, and it can be less safe. But
so Steve, sorry,
save you.
Stephen, you had your hand up? I thought I saw Stephen raise his hand, but I guess you can unmute if you wanted to say something, Stephen. We don't hear you right now.
No, I was just scratching myself.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
It's not an auction. Okay, weather hazards. Two things with wet roads. One is wet roads are slippery on the tires. The other thing is, depending on the kind of brakes you have, the brakes can fade in wet weather. So give yourself longer stopping distance, exactly as with the car if it's raining. Cantilever brakes, the old style brakes are going to be the worst. Disc brakes are much better because they get less wet. They're not near the tires, and they just tend to stop better. But if you don't have disc brakes, then be really careful with wet and give yourself time to stop. Oh yes, there are a lot of amusing paints that are used on pavement, and some are very slippery, and you've got to be really careful with those. Just slow down and be aware that when you run over certain lines that they're not going to grip very well.
So I think that just about wraps it up for what we wanted to talk about for safety. So just a few other pointers about the bike rally in general. This is the time to get ready for that big ride to Montreal. It's never too early to do that. Get your fundraising started if you haven't done that yet. There is a fundraising deadline, June 30th, that you need to meet your minimum. If you haven't met it by then, don't panic. You're not going to be kicked off the bike rally. You'll just get a message from your team captains or someone on the bike rally committee asking you to please get your fundraising done. And then by the time the ride happens, if you haven't met your minimum, you'll be asked either to make up the difference to get to your minimum yourself or asked not to ride. Your choice. Of course, you've probably all seen the e-news, and we've got a couple of great Facebook groups for the bike rally. There's the very important bikerally.org website that has the calendar we talked about and other training and support blogs and stuff. Make sure you got your bike tuned up and get it fit properly for you if it's a new bike that you haven't rode before. Now is the time to book that tune-up. Things are going to get really busy really, really soon. As soon as it gets over like 10, 12 degrees in April, everyone wants their bike tuned up. You want to beat that rush and get your bike tuned up as soon as you can. Get your training started. It does not hurt to start early. I know it's cold. That won't hurt either. The cold weather is uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt. And you want to train frequently and consistently so that by the time you ride to Montreal, it'll feel really good. And get your camping gear together. We are camping 4 nights on the ride to Montreal. So you want to make sure you've got a tent, that you know how to set it up, that anything else that you need for camping is at your disposal in case things run out as the weather gets better.
So help is at hand. If you have any questions about anything, about gear, training itself, nutrition, so training at bikerally.org, that's us. For fundraising, contact Yannick, who is a specialist at that. And so that's fundraising at bikerally.org. And PWA staff itself, Emma Cole is at EM Cubbin at PWA Toronto. That pretty well ends it. We're
almost. I just want to go through. Well, yeah, and I guess if you have questions and other things you want to ask before we end the presentation, by all means, this is a good time. And no question is a stupid question. All questions are important, good questions on the bike rally, especially from first-year riders. Alex and Gabby are asking, is there a list of suggested camping gear available on the bike rally's website? Not yet. But I believe that sometime in April, so sometime this month, they will issue the Bike Rally Handbook. That's the 20+ page, really important PDF. It'll come electronically this year. And within that is a whole long checklist of what you need to bring or recommended to bring on the bike rally. Some of it's required, like you obviously have to have a tent and you have to have something to sleep on in your tent. But you'll see that list coming out in the handbook. That would be my best suggestion at this point. And Kate is saying that she's already spoken to Yannick about fundraising, and he's been very nice. Yeah, he's a real nice guy and very helpful too, that for sure. Yannick is a real fundraising expert, and he's happy to chat with you one-on-one. He's in Montreal, but he'll do it on Zoom and spend as much time as you need to get help with fundraising tips and ideas and just some more confidence as a fundraiser. Because to be honest, Steve, you and I think we shared the same experience when we were first-year riders. Fundraising was the hardest thing. It was harder than training.
Yeah, it kept me 2 years from, I wanted to join 2 years before, so I had no idea how I could raise the money. It turns out that it was fine. I had no problems at all raising it. It depends on your network, people you know, although I will say I cheated. I was so nervous about it that I offered anybody who donated $100, I'd bake them a pie. So when it got to 26 pies, I brought it up to $200, and $100 was a baker's dozen of cookies. And I still do that. And although I made a mistake on my pitch this year, I forgot it was 200, I made it 250, but nobody seems to have noticed. So it's working really well. So that's one fundraising tip among many others. Oh, and the other thing is, the second year, you kind of think, well, all those people donated the first year, but are they going to want to do it the second year? Well, I found that pretty well all of them did. And so now I'm, my 16th year or so, and a lot of the same people are still donating. If they like you, they will donate. And if they really like pies, and you bake pies. But the other thing is that if I drop somebody from the list by mistake, this happened today, somebody's going to email you or text you and say, so are you riding to Montreal? where's the pitch? So it does work and it stays.
Well, I'm going to stop screen sharing now, just so we can see everyone in the Zoom window here. And any other questions, things you'd like to ask, by all means. And if you're not comfortable in this group asking them, you can always email Steve and me. You can email your team captains. There are lots of people who love answering your questions about the bike rally. So I guess I don't see any more questions coming through. So I will thank everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now too. Thank you so much for being part of this presentation.